Hey, if you're here for the first time or maybe the first time in a long time, I want you to know that today is a unique day. All of us together have been working together for the last 8 weeks to get to this moment where we would step out in faith together. And I want you to know this isn't normal for us, but normally what we do is do ministry together. Today, we're going to do that in a tangible way, and that's unique for us. Today is Commitment Sunday and our efforts to make room because everyone matters. About 8 weeks ago, we decided that God was really saying to our church, to each of us, that these 8 weeks would determine the impact of the next 8 decades of ministry. It's hard for us to imagine sometimes because most of us, if not all of us, won't be around for 8 decades of ministry. It's hard to imagine that because what we're doing today will plant seeds for trees that will grow that we'll never get to sit in the shade of because it's not about us. It's about sharing influence with people. Here's the deal, that if these 8 weeks are going to determine the impact of the next 8 decades, then it can't be about a building. That's for sure. It can't be about a structure or a facility. What it has to be is about sharing influence in lives. 4 weeks ago, we together as a church, we had another kind of Commitment Sunday where we committed to reaching our one. The one person or people that God has placed in our life, the people that represent the 99 that Jesus left in safety so that he could chase after the one sheep, we identified our one. We wrote their names on stones, 400 of them, more than 1,000 names written across all these stones that are for us like our Commitment Sunday 4 weeks ago, saying, I will dedicate my life to reaching my one. I'll invest in their life. I'll share influence. I'll open up my life. I'll notice their story, and I'll engage them in next steps. I will move my life into their life and share influence, and that matters. And then over these last 4 weeks, we've been moving toward this moment of obedience. We've identified our one, and now we're going to make room for our one. And today, as we close out this time, we'll be sharing our own commitments. We'll fill out our commitment cards. We'll dedicate them in time of prayer, and we will make our commitments to move forward and determine the impact of the next 8 decades of ministry. Over these 4 weeks, we've been talking about the miracles that Jesus performed that particularly relate to us. You know, a few weeks back, we talked about making room to remember in our lives. We talked about where the disciples and Jesus were on a boat and a storm came up. I'll bet that the disciples that were in that boat never looked at a storm the same way because they remember then what Jesus did for them, right? They'll look back on that day and go, remember the day he stood up and he spoke to the wind and the waves and the wind and the waves obeyed him? Remember we asked that question, who is this man that even the wind and the waves do what he says? They would never see a storm the same way again because they'd make room in their life to remember. And when we look back and we see God's provision in our life, it gives me confidence and the ability to place my faith and my trust in him during times where I'm not sure what's going to happen, like today. I don't know what the future holds. All I do know is who holds the future. And then the next week, we talked about last week about feeding this multitude of people. People were hungry, starving, and Jesus said, no, you feed them. And they go out and they look for people to share food. And this little boy brings his lunch that is seemingly useless to feed a multitude of people. And Jesus takes what this little boy brought. The little boy brought the natural. Jesus brought the super. And what happened next was nothing short of supernatural. In this 4 weeks, we've also talked about this woman who is overlooked at best and at worst rejected and despised because of a medical issue that she was facing. This medical issue, we call her the woman with the issue of blood, is kind of the gentle way of saying it. But this issue of blood made her ceremonially unclean. And anyone she touched would be ceremonially unclean. She would literally be ostracized. No one could have any meaningful physical contact with her at all. Not a hug, not a pat on the back, not a handshake, nothing. She was alone and she was hopeless, but Jesus made room to see her. He not only saw her, right? He not only recognized her, he touched her, he healed her, and he gave her more than just her medical healing. He gave her an identity when he called her daughter. She was in so many ways felt unfit and useless, but Jesus saw her and healed her in ways that she needed much more desperately than physical healing. What we didn't talk about was what was going on at the time when Jesus heals this woman. What we didn't talk about was the story around that, because there's even a bigger story around that than just the healing. Jesus had been teaching, and he moves to the other side of a place, and he kind of gets around some people in a different community, and they catch word that he's there. And there's one particular man right before he heals the woman with the issue of blood that comes to him. His name is Jairus. It says this: a man named Jairus, he was a leader of the local synagogue, came and fell at Jesus' feet. He came and fell at Jesus' feet in public, right in front of everybody, pleading with him to come home. His only daughter, who was about 12 years old, was dying. Now you got to catch a little bit here. It says that Jairus he's a leader in the synagogue. And there's a difference between the synagogue teaching and Jesus, this homeless teacher who's going from place to place and healing the sick. And there's becoming this division between the Jews and the leaders of the religious community and the work of Jesus, known as the Way. There's becoming this fracture, and people were starting to have to choose a side. But Jairus is a leader in the local synagogue. He had everybody looking up to him. He had the respect of the Pharisees who would come in. He had all of those things. He was a leader in the local synagogue. And it wasn't politically in his favor to align himself with Jesus. But something big was going on in Jairus' life. Jairus' little daughter, his 12-year-old, was sick, and not kind of sick. She was dying. And when Jairus knew that she was dying and he knew that Jesus could help, he's like, who cares what people think about me? I'm all in, because when your little girl is sick, you'll do whatever it takes. 2010, Sheila and I were getting ready downstairs. The girls were getting ready upstairs. We heard a kind of a strange clunk and a weird cry. I mean, when you have 3 girls, you get used to crying at some point, but this was a weird cry, like somebody got hurt and didn't know what to do. It was like a scared and hurt cry. So we went upstairs, we're trying to figure it out, what's going on. Maya comes out of the room, her arm is down, and she's like, I hurt my arm, I fell. We didn't know what to do because she could do this. And I said, well, can you bend it? And she said she bent it, but it kind of looked funny. And she bent it, but she could put it back down. I'm like, well, it seems like maybe it's just hurt a little bit. So she goes on, tries to get ready, and it hurts a lot. So I said, okay, well, Sheila's got to be in the classroom with the other girls, and I've got to do a radio interview because we hadn't even launched Journey Church yet. And so I said, well, how about this? I'll take her to the hospital. If something is wrong, I'll call you. But I'll take her. She can just go with me. I'll bring her up later on. So I take her to the North Hospital, right? Go in, roll into the emergency room. We get in there. They do the x-rays. They come back and they say, hey, Mr. Brown, we're going to need to take her by ambulance to Le Bonheur in Memphis. And I'm like, look, man, look, I get it, okay? Her arm's broken, they said, and I get that there's some concern and whatever, but I'm like, I'm a dad, and I'm like, it's okay. We came here in a truck. I said, how about this? How about instead, because I don't really want to pay for the ambulance ride for an hour each way to Memphis. Hey, can I just take her? I brought her here in my car. I'll just be super careful. I'll take her there. And he puts the x-ray up and he says, Mr. Brown, would you look at this right here? And I said, sure. And he said, you see this hazy area that's kind of jagged? And I said, yeah. He said, you see this darker area right here next to it? I said, yeah. He goes, that's her bone broken, and that is her artery laying right next to it. If she moves wrong, she'll cut that artery and she'll bleed out before you can get off of the highway, let alone to a hospital. I said, are you sure we don't need to fly her? Right? Because I went from my girl hurt her arm to my girl's arm is broken to my little girl might die in my care. And it did not matter to me if we've got to get like a rocket, we've got to bring Labanner here. I don't care what happens. Nothing stops a daddy protecting his little girl. And that's how Jairus felt. Jairus is like, look, this one matters to me. And I don't care who I have to align with. I don't care how I have to embarrass myself. I don't care what happens. This little girl is top priority. And so he falls at the feet of Jesus and he says, hey, my daughter, my only daughter, she's 12 years old and she's dying. And he convinces Jesus to come with him. He's desperate at this moment. And so Jesus starts making his way through the crowd of people who are now getting the idea that Jesus is healing people. And so they're stopping him. They all want something from Jesus, but Jairus is like, hey, we got to go. Make a hole, bro. Let's make it happen. Let's move forward. And so he does that, and he's making a hole, and the disciples are with him, and they're pushing through the crowd, and the woman with the issue of blood reaches out and touches Jesus, and she falls to the ground. And Jairus, his stomach falls to the ground with her because he sees this woman who reaches out and touches the hem of his garment. And Jairus is like, my little girl is what matters right now. But Jesus stops to ask, who touched me? And he looks at this woman, knowing who touched him. And he says, who touched me? And she says, I touched you. And he heals her sickness the moment she touched the hem of his garment. But then he doesn't just go, hey, I got to get somewhere, but let's talk later, right? He doesn't just turn around. He makes room in Jairus' life for a miracle. He spends time with this woman. He calls her daughter. It matters to him. He spends time with her. And all the while this is happening, Jairus gets the news. Next couple of verses say it this way. It says that while he was still speaking to her, a messenger arrived from the home of Jairus, and the leader of the synagogue, and told him, your daughter is dead. There's no use troubling the teacher now. He's already aligned himself with her. He's already fought through the crowd. He's already paid all of the price. And now, after all of the price has been paid, he's already put it all out there. And now he's lost his little girl. Could you imagine how he feels? I mean, I'm sure he's a tiny bit happy for the woman who got healed, but nothing like the complete despair in his gut. I'll bet anything that he's a little bit angry with this woman who's been suffering for years now, all 12 years, by the way, same number of years that his little girl's been alive. She's been suffering for 12 years. She's been alive for 12 years, and now she's dead and she's healed. Can you imagine how he felt? But Jesus speaks to him in this, right? And what happens is that Jesus said something that mattered, right? Jesus made a difference, right? Now, we say this a lot around here. The Journey Church is a little bit like Sir Mix-a-Lot. We like big butts, and we cannot lie, but this is the biggest butt, right? She was dead, but Jesus heard. Let me just say that a little louder for the people in the back, right? That she was dead, she was hopeless, she was lifeless, but Jesus heard what he said. Right? Jesus' hearing is what changes the story from death to life. When Jesus heard what had happened, he said to Jairus, do not be afraid, right? Just have faith. Just have faith, and she will be healed. Now listen, when we hear these words, when we say like, just don't be afraid, that's like telling somebody how to feel, right? Telling somebody how to feel is not a good way to care for people, isn't it? I shouldn't tell you to not be afraid, but when the person telling you not to be afraid is the person who can heal the little girl, who can bring her from death to life, when the person telling you not to be afraid is Jesus, who gave his life, who's Jesus with God with skin on, when the person telling you not to be afraid is Jesus, when the person telling you to have faith is Jesus, it changes everything. Remember back to when the disciples were in that boat and the storm starts raging around them. It's overwhelming and they're terrified, right? They're 100% crippled in fear. And Jesus comes up and speaks to the storm, and the storm calms. And then he looks at them, and he doesn't belittle their faith. He doesn't make fun of them. He doesn't call them names. He doesn't say, look, you're losers. What's up with the faith? Don't you have any faith in me? He just asks them a very simple question. He says, where is your faith? Where is your faith? You see, the truth is that Jesus challenged Jairus. Jesus challenged Jairus to replace his fear with faith. Replace his fear with faith. Fear and faith are not the same, are they? And those disciples in the boat, they were afraid and they were putting their faith in something. Jesus didn't ask them, you have no faith. He didn't point fingers at them. He didn't just, like reject them for their lack of faith. He just asked, where is your faith? The reality is we all have faith in something. The question is, where are we putting our faith? The disciples were putting their faith in their boat. They were putting their faith in their skill as sailors, right? The Jairus was putting his faith in Jesus, this healer, right? Like all these people, the question isn't, do we have faith or don't we have faith? The question is, where are we putting our faith? And then if you're saying, look, I place my faith in Jesus, but I'm afraid, here's what happens. We have some of our faith in Jesus and some of our faith somewhere else. And here's what happens. When we feel faith, fear is what we feel when our faith is in something that isn't dependable. Think about that. Fear is what we feel when our faith is in something that isn't dependable. When our faith is in the boat and the boat seems to be crumbling, we get afraid. When our faith is placed in our skill and our skill doesn't seem to be enough, we feel fear as a result. When we are afraid, we're like, hey, we got to get there by this moment. When Jairus was terrified because he's like, you got to get there before she dies. His faith was in Jesus and the timing. Then he realized, hey, wait a minute, we missed it. And he's like, hey, I know you're starting to feel afraid. Don't be afraid. If you just place your faith in the right place, I can do miracles. Kind of comes down to like this question of this card, doesn't it? Like, where are we putting our faith? If the idea of those numbers that you're considering filling in those things, if the idea of that is terrifying you, I get it. It is terrifying, isn't it? Because often what it does is reveal to us that our faith is really in our ability to provide. When our faith is in our ability to provide and we start to say, I'm going to give away some of my ability to provide for myself, that's scary stuff to do. But if we do this in faith, if we ask God, we listen to his voice and we do exactly what he tells us, he'll never lead us to a place where he doesn't provide for us and protect us all along the way. And so what we're really doing in expressing our fear is saying, God, I'm choosing to believe that you provide for all of my needs according to your riches and glory. And what happens next in this is that Jairus rises to the challenge, like you and I are rising to the challenge of saying, I'm going to trust you, Jesus, more than I trust me and my resources. And what happens next is Jesus arrived at the house. Jesus wouldn't let anyone go in with him except Peter, James, and John, the three closest guys to him, and the little girl's father and their mother. And then the house was filled with people weeping and wailing. But he said, stop the weeping, right? Hey, that's enough. You guys are weeping and you're afraid because you've lost someone, because your faith is in something that is insufficient. He's like, stop the weeping. She isn't dead. She's only asleep. But the crowd of people, all the mourners that they had paid to be there, that's what they were doing, is they were paying the mourners. The mourners, she said, but the crowd laughed at him because they all knew that she had died. It's an interesting word. They all knew, right? They knew. And I know how this goes. I know how things are. What they appeared to do was know, right? They thought they knew, but they didn't know. What they thought they knew was only in the natural world. But Jesus is like, look, I got something to tell you something. There's a whole nother thing you don't know about. I know what you think you know. I think it's the same way we feel, isn't it? It's the same way we feel when we get into these things. We're like, I know I don't have enough. There's too much month and not enough money. There's too much this and not enough that, right? There's too much expenses and not enough income. But Jesus is like, hey, I know what you think you know, but you don't know something else. And what happened next was pretty profound. He just adds this one sentence. Jesus took her by the hand and said in a loud voice, my child, get up. My child, get up. You see, what's interesting is the contrast between what they knew, right? They were 100% certain of what they knew in the natural realm. And Jesus was like, hey, you don't know about a whole nother equation. It's the same equation that we've seen in every single miracle, isn't it? It's the equation where the natural realm said, hey, this storm is too much. But the supernatural realm, Jesus stands up and speaks to the wind and the waves, and they obey him. In the natural realm, a little boy's lunch is not enough to feed an entire multitude of people. But in the supernatural realm, Jesus can step in and take the natural and add his super to the story. In the natural realm, this woman had tried every single thing that she knew to try. Doctors and miracle healers and superstition, all of it, and only gotten worse. But in the supernatural realm, her faith heals her. In the natural realm, they knew that this little girl was dead. But Jesus knew in the supernatural realm. He's like, hey, you guys don't know a whole lot about anything other than what you're seeing. And he takes her hand and he heals her. And the next verse is pretty amazing. At that moment, life returned to her and she immediately stood up. She immediately stood up, and then Jesus told them to give her something to eat. He brought her from death to life, right? From like, I know she's dead to I know she's alive. And now he tells them to give her something to eat. And what that reminds us in a moment like this, it reminds us that God's provision doesn't replace our practical role. It partners with our practical role. We get to be the hands and feet. We get to be the people who take the people that Jesus brings from death to life and help them take their next step toward Jesus. We get to partner with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords to help people take their next step toward Jesus. He does the miracle. We do the helping. He partners with us. And our natural part today looks a little bit like a commitment card. In fact, you've got one in the back of your vision workbook, and we have one right here on this screen. And if you're joining us online, what I can remind you of is that there is about now going to pop up a comment with a link to a digital commitment card that you can fill out when we're done here. And it doesn't look exactly like this online, but it has this same information. I just want to run over it for just a moment so that we all know what we're getting ourselves into as we step into this moment of obedience where God partners with our natural gift and brings his super to it. So what we've been doing over the last 8 weeks is we've been asking God, what is my kickoff gift? 2 weeks from today, we'll have our kickoff offering. My kickoff gift is a one-time gift that you're saying, this is my first big step in the direction of obedience. Okay? Writing down our commitment isn't obedience, is it? It's just communicating our plan. Writing down your kickoff gift isn't obeying. 2 weeks from today, you go, okay, that's my weekend. I'm going to give whatever I feel like God has asked me to give to my kickoff offering. And you just write that number right there or fill it in online. The next one down says my 36-month commitment. My 36-month commitment is exactly what it sounds like. Over the next 36 months, I'm going to commit this total amount of money, and it goes in that space. Now, you can do that however you want. Now, right below it, you'll see that it's written X number of dollars for 156 weeks. That's 3 years of weeks. Or X number of dollars for the next 36 months. You can do it in other ways, but break it down to one of those two for us, would you? Would you just write down like X number of dollars per week comes out to be this much? Or if you just want to put the total here, we'll break it out and don't worry about it. Okay? So now we've got the kickoff gift is a one-time gift on November 9th. The 36-month gift, that commitment, starts whenever you want to start it, and it's just kind of a monthly, annual, or weekly gift, however you want to do it, to make that commitment. This non-cash gift is where we've been talking about this, and there's a description about it in the page next to it if you need more questions. But non-cash giving is really just as simple as saying, hey, I've got something that I own already. It's not cash. It's jewelry, or it's a valuable of some kind, or an asset, or a stock, or a bond, or a mutual fund. And you own that already. And all we're doing right here is you're going to give a rough, if you're saying, hey, I want to give that, put a rough value on it here, and in the space below it, describe it. Okay, what we'll do is we'll talk to you, and we'll just make sure that you liquidating it or us liquidating it is the very best way for you to be generous. We want to get 100% of the value of your generosity. We don't want to waste a penny of it. So we want to make sure that this is as good for you as it possibly can be, and that we get the most out of your generosity. So what you're doing is my kickoff gift, one time on November 9th. My 36-month commitment over the next 3 years, I commit this total amount. My total of non-cash giving, and then my total down here. And if you'd fill out this information, what we're going to do next is dedicate this time in prayer. Now listen, I'm not going to create a big emotional moment for you, but I am going to allow you to sit in this. It's a holy moment. It really is just a moment that we don't manufacture or create. Your obedience, your faith step, your next step, if you want to put it that way, is to simply ask God, listen, and now you're beginning the process of obeying. What we're going to do is I'm going to give you a moment. Maybe you came in here with a number in your mind and you're feeling like maybe God's going, hey, maybe you weren't listening close enough. Maybe there's something that God's just imposing or impressing on you and you're going, okay, I get it. I'm starting to listen. I'm going to give you a minute of time just kind of on your own space, whether you're in one of these chairs or joining us online, and give a moment for you to pray over your gift. And then do this. Don't just ask God if there's something more or less that he wants you to do. Would you pray and commit this step forward? This is not about money. It's not about dollars and pennies. This is about faith and obedience. Money can just buy stuff. Faith can move mountains. I'm going to give you just a few seconds to pray and ask God, is this right? And then commit that to him in prayer. And then I'm going to invite you up here to walk up in front and to communicate that by putting your card inside of these stones. If you're joining us online, we're going to take just a few seconds to pray. And then when we're done here, if you'd click that link, that'll take you to the online commitment card. We would love for you to join us in your faith step, because what's done from a place of faith cannot be stopped. Money can just buy stuff, but faith can move mountains. Let's pray. God, we're grateful that even technology allows us to participate together, even when we're not physically in the same place. We're grateful that the same act of faith is available to each of us. God, I just pray over the folks who are joining us online right now. I pray over their obedience. Pray that you'd bind the efforts of the enemy that seek to tell us that we're not valuable or that our part doesn't matter. God, we're grateful that your goodness is bigger than that. Your power is greater than that. God, I just pray over the digital commitments that are coming in over today and the next few days. God, I just pray that those would come from a place of faith in you and not a financial decision, that every single dollar that pours in commitments would be done from a place of confidence and trust in your goodness. God, we know that we place our faith somewhere. We want to place it in you. We ask your blessing on these. In your name we pray. Amen.